Welcome to Wisdom Talk Radio, a collaborative community of explorers in conscious living. There are so many situations in the world that are challenging, in the world, in life, and every day it feels like there's something new that we could be upset by. And many of us in the face of all of this struggle to stay connected to our hearts, to hold love as our center in the face of what we see and experience. From what I hear from listeners, from so many people, from clients, I know people can use guidance. We could use some guidance on ways to cultivate the kind of qualities that really transform the world from the inside out. And that's what my guest today has to offer to you. So please do stay with us, as I think you will be surprised and certainly not disappointed. Welcome, I'm Laurie Seymour, host of Wisdom Talk Radio and CEO and founder of the Baca Institute and creator of the Quantum Connection process. Discover your unique connection with the essence of who you are by taking the Quantum Connection quiz. Because we are each designed to directly connect with Source differently in our own unique style. And knowing that style, both your creative power and your learning edge, opens a deeper connection with the universe. It's the secret to creating what you truly want in your life, because who you are is exactly what is needed now. So my guest today is Oren Jay Sofer, who teaches Buddhist meditation, mindfulness, and communication internationally. He holds a degree in comparative religion from Columbia University and is a certified trainer of nonviolent communication and a somatic experiencing practitioner for the healing of trauma. He is the author of several books, including the best-selling Say What You Mean, A Mindful Approach to Nonviolent Communication, and the latest, Your Heart Was Made for This, the contemplative practices for meeting a world in crisis with courage, integrity, and love. Welcome, Oren, to Wisdom Talk Radio. I'm really happy you are here.
Thanks, Laurie. Me too.
So let's begin in the middle or in the beginning, wherever we can.
As you wish. Guide us.
I'm really interested to know from you, what is it about you and your life that you were moved to write this book, this last book? And why was it yours to write?
Yeah. I mean, I feel really fortunate to have had the chance in my life to practice so much meditation, to meet some pretty remarkable meditation teachers. I had the privilege of traveling to India when I was 19, doing my undergraduate studies at Columbia and living in a Buddhist monastery for 3.5 months, which is where I started my Buddhist practice. So there's a lot that's been offered to me by life, and some of the kind of privileges I've been afforded growing up with the conditions I had in the United States and the first world with middle class family and being able to go to college and so forth. And from a very young adult age, I've, as many of us have, felt a deep concern and empathy for the struggles and violence and suffering in our world. And so the first part of my career has been really focused around sharing meditation, and also teaching people how to communicate better, how to integrate their values into their conversations, their relationships, and their lives. And in 2020, the earth shifted, the ground fell away beneath all of us, around the planet when COVID hit, and then it seemed like things just kind of continued to get difficult here in the United States with George Floyd's murder, um, the wildfires, a series of mass shootings, and everyone I was in touch with, students, participants in my classes, colleagues, were understandably really overwhelmed and struggling. And it seemed like one of the ways I could help was to share about how to build more inner resources using the understanding from meditation practice that I developed over the years. And then that whole process of wanting to support people to have a stronger foundation from which to meet the challenges of our times took on a different meaning when my wife got pregnant about a year later. We were chatting beforehand about having a young toddler, and yeah, really looking ahead to the future in a different way and feeling that sort of deep, intimate, vulnerable connection with where our society and planet are headed. So the book became for me not just something about offering resources, but also a deep personal investigation into um, what is the relevance really of what I've devoted most of my adult life to, this practice of contemplation and meditation and communication, and really grappling with that question of how does our inner life play a role in the healing and transformation of our world. And so it was both a process for me of exploring that question and wanting to offer a guide and some inspiration and really practical tools for, as you said so beautifully in the introduction, how to build more inner resources, but then also how to translate those into action, how to get involved in a way that is sustainable and authentic for each of us.
I really appreciate that, Oren, because I'm in the midst of writing a book, and I too am a
Mm,
meditation teacher,
mm,
and and I'm really aware of all of the years of my training and experience, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what is it that is really needing to be communicated? What is it that could help? What is it that
mhm.
could offer something where there hasn't been that before?
Yeah,
And I really
yeah.
appreciated the way that you structured the book in these different qualities and in
Mm,
bringing them forward. Um, and I must say, I learned things as I was reading through, like, oh yeah, that's another way to speak to how meditation could you could take this into your meditation in a new way. Um, so I really thank you for that. I'm sure
absolutely.
I'm sure there will be pieces that come in because I do it twice weekly online meditation class, and I do a talk in the beginning, and I
Oh,
can
great.
feel that there will be pieces that will sift in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So how do you see that connection? And I mean, you've just touched on that, but the connection between individual transformation, inner transformation,
Hmm.
and that collective change in our society.
Yeah. So the two are inextricably linked.
Mhm,
And I think that often what we see is a kind of false dichotomy, and they're sort of presented in this either or way, right?
mhm,
We're either on a spiritual path and sort of cultivating our inner life, or we are activists, we're involved in social change, we're trying to make the world a better place. And what I see, and the very rich tradition of what's known as socially engaged Buddhism or just engaged Buddhism sees, is that the two need each other. They depend on each other.
mm,
So if we focus on the inner life alone without also acting, without applying our love and our compassion and our wisdom to the world around us, we may fail to respond to suffering. We don't actually end up helping in the ways that are needed.
mm,
And yet, if we focus exclusively on the external without simultaneously healing and strengthening our hearts, we risk recreating some of the very things that we're seeking to address
Mm,
in our work for change, so we can unconsciously reenact patriarchy and sexism and racism.
mhm,
We look at history and we see how many revolutions have unintentionally and unwittingly replaced one domination system with another.
mhm,
And just look around today at movements for change, and we can see how they are subverted and sometimes even torn apart by right wrong thinking, us them mentalities, cancel
mhm.
culture, or the risk of just simply burning out.
Yeah.
So we need both. And the aim of the book, and really of engaged practice, is that individual transformation and social change work support each other, that they can inform and support each other.
Mhm,
And the contemplative work that we do provides a way to align our means with the end that we're seeking, so that in the very process of working for change, organizing, serving, we're living into the world that we want to create.
mhm, mhm. I love that, living into the world we want to create.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'm such a, action is really important to me. I mean, taking action on whatever level that is,
Hmm.
having a wonderful idea, feeling inspired. Well, do you just stay in that bliss of feeling inspired? Or do
Hmm.
you look to take that out into the world because it may be the solution to a problem that seemed intractable? And until you take that inspired idea and make it inspired action,
Yeah,
nothing really happens.
right.
So you talk as one of the qualities early on in your book about aspiration, and I
Mm.
and I have to say I had not thought about aspiration as a
Mm.
quality that would be called out, and I loved what you had to say to it because you say it connects us to what's possible,
That's right. Yeah.
and having the sense that things can be different. So how do
Hmm.
you cultivate aspiration?
Mm. What a beautiful question. So just to start by building on what you just shared, that aspiration is an orienting force in our lives, individually or collectively. It's a sense of, as you said, what's possible, but also like vision. And it's connected to a longing in the heart, a
Mm,
longing that yearns for something better, something more fulfilling, um, more just or good, um, or just simply less crushing. I mean, there's so much in our world today that is soul crushing, whether it's just the pace of our lives, the economic pressure, or the heartrending suffering and violence that we see.
mhm,
And so it starts with that yearning inside, with that stirring inside. And then there are two parts to aspiration that we can draw on in order to articulate or know or sense, what is it I want to move towards? And one is, I talk about a more receptive aspect. And this is the part of our heart um, that can touch into something we trust, that can touch
mm,
into something that upholds us, that we rely on. And, just this question of, what's the deepest truth you know? What is it that you know to be true in your heart at the deepest level? That's an aspect of aspiration, because it's something inside that we can come back to that supports us. And then the active aspect of aspiration is this sense of, what is it I long for? What do I want to move towards?
mm,
And this is something that we've seen, throughout history collectively. Articulating an aspiration can galvanize an entire people to
mhm,
work for change. You think about, or I think about the Declaration of Independence for the United States,
Hmm,
which
that's what
is
I was just thinking about.
inspired movements for
Yeah.
revolution and democracy and sovereignty around the whole world, and
Mhm.
is still sort of pushing this country towards the values of that document. Or um, Dr. King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech, the World Social Forum, "Another world is possible." The United Farm Workers slogan, "Si se puede." It's this sense of something is possible. This is what we're longing for. This is what we're moving towards. And it's hard sometimes, particularly when we look around. Many of the activists and students that I meet with are struggling with hopelessness, with
Mhm.
despair. And this is a sign of the loss of aspiration, of the absence of that
Mm.
sense.
Where does
Um,
that loss happen?
mm, I mean, it happens in the heart. It happens, in
So
this
it's at
sort
a
of
it's
deep.
at the personal level.
Well, I mean, I think I should say we experience it in the heart, but it's showing up informed through the events of our world and our times. So whether it's the latest news on the coral reefs, or the absence of a diplomatic and political solution to the crisis in the Middle East, we look around, and then the heart can kind of sink, seeing it's like all of the doors are closed. All of the efforts we're seeking is nothing's
Mhm.
coming to fruition. So it's connected to that. But I think it's important to recognize that the sense of aspiration, it's not like something you either have or you don't. It's an action. It's something we do. And when it's hard to find, we can borrow it from others. We can lean on an inspirational figure, a mentor. We can lean on that deeper sense of trust in our heart
Mhm.
for what
Mhm.
upholds us, what we hold most dear, most sacred, to recognize that life is a precious gift, and that the human heart is innately sensitive and connected to love, and that it's possible to reclaim that in spite of all of the trauma and violence.
Mhm.
And it takes work, it takes effort. And yet, as you reminded us, in the question you asked, it's there at the beginning of the book, because if we don't have some sense of possibility or aspiration, we don't try. We don't bring forth energy or
Mhm.
effort. So
Mhm.
that's why it's so essential in the process.
And it's something that I see a lot, where self-doubt or doubt comes in and interrupts that living from that place of aspiration, or claiming it, or
Mm,
trusting it,
mhm.
trusting that you say this is possible, but how could it be when we look
Yeah.
around and we see evidence to the contrary?
Yeah.
Or how can I how can I trust that that spark of divinity is alive and well within me, because maybe it's not. And then, that doubt creeps in and interrupts that which goes for love.
Yeah. Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? Um, whether we're talking about what's possible for us individually in terms of our own happiness and awakening, or what's possible for us collectively as
Hmm.
as a species, um, makes me think of that famous quote from Che Guevara, who said, "Be realistic, demand the impossible." And I don't know. It seems to me that real change always seems impossible until it happens. I mean,
Hmm.
you and I lived through the Berlin Wall coming down, right? No one thought that would happen.
Right.
And it was, it was literally, right, like in the matter of days. One day everything was fine,
Hmm.
and then the next day it happened. And so there are these tipping points in history and social change, and um, those tipping points come not just out of nowhere.
Hmm.
They come when the conditions are right, because sometimes generations of people have worked
Hmm.
for that change. And I think about so this is, we're talking, one of the things we're talking about here, we're talking about other qualities that sustain us on this road, like patience, like devotion. I
Hmm.
think of the suffragettes who worked for decades. I think it was 90 years before the women obtained the right to vote.
Mhm.
And who were inspired initially by the abolitionists. You probably know some of the history that those two movements were linked initially in the 19th century, and then at a certain point split. Um, due to a variety of conditions. Some of them, some of the women involved thinking like, we're never going to accomplish our aim if we link it to the right
Right.
to vote for African Americans because there was so much racism.
Mhm.
So the sense of it feeling impossible, I think we have to look at history and recognize that it's often felt that way, and yet we still take one step at a time and celebrate the small victories, and that's why joy is so important
Mhm.
because it is so daunting and it is so hard. So we need to recognize when there's any shift, any transformation, any movement, even if it's two steps forward, one step back, to take joy and gratitude and celebration and appreciation in that movement because it's going in the right direction.
And to take that within oneself too. I mean,
Absolutely.
that that we talked about the individual transformation and how that's intrinsically connected with the
Hmm.
transformation of the world. And it seems that I may go too much because my focus is much more on the individual. But I
Mm,
see that that individual is, we are we are all connected. No matter what, we are connected with everything. And so, given
yeah,
that connection, any change I make within myself has, because I'm changing the whole field, has that impact on everything. And that doesn't mean I get to just sit on the top of my mountain and meditate, because it's
right.
never drawn me actually. Um, but to see how the practice of loving ourself allows us to bring that feeling of love into the world and into
Right.
every interaction that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I find that many people need help in maintaining their focus,
Mm,
sustaining energy.
mm,
What could you suggest about that? How do we improve those aspects of
yeah.
our life?
Yeah, you're talking about two very, very important um, capacities we
Mhm.
have as humans: energy and concentration or focus. These are natural, innate abilities that we're
Mhm.
each endowed with: our life force and then our ability to focus. And yet, the sort of habits of our lives and the forces of our society tend to shatter and squander those inner resources.
Mhm.
So it takes some practice and some doing to reclaim them and use them more wisely, to steward our energy and to cultivate our capacity for a kind of sustainable and deep focus in life.
Mhm.
So with energy, some of the things that I recommend are developing some awareness of your body. Our energy, including mental energy, comes from the body. And when we are aware of our body, we naturally start to learn about our needs energetically.
Mhm.
And one of the ways to sustain energy is to develop a little bit more awareness and sensitivity about how much energy is actually needed.
Mhm.
So, just a small example: many, many years ago, I was doing a meditation retreat with a Vietnamese Zen master and teacher, poet, Thich Nhat Hanh. And he was pointing out, when you brush your teeth, how are you holding the toothbrush? Are you kind of like gripping it really, really tightly and sort of rushing through? Or, are you brushing your teeth with a sense of care and relaxation and patience? And I looked, and sure enough, I was, kind of like over brushing my teeth, which of course was destroying my gums, but was also just wasting a
Mhm.
lot of energy.
Yeah.
And we can look at that in other ways. So, um, as you're sitting at your computer writing email, like how much tension is there in your body? If you're washing the dishes, we're able to attune the amount of energy we're putting out in a way that's appropriate to the task so that we're not wasting
Mhm.
energy by
Mhm.
overexerting ourselves, even in a conversation. sometimes it's more powerful to just state your point in a clear, even, and relaxed way than
Mhm.
to raise your voice and make a big deal out of it and
Which gets
waste a bunch of,
everybody riled up and nobody gets anything done.
yeah, and wastes a ton of energy. So this is one thing that is really essential, determining how much energy is actually needed. And again, a lot of that depends on awareness of your body, being able to feel your body and know what's happening inside. Another benefit of being able to feel your body a little bit more, stay connected to and grounded in your body, is getting the signals for when we need to rest. And this is one of the things that our society is so bad about, because we're sort of over caffeinated and distracted and overly busy. And rest is frowned upon often as, lazy, self-indulgent, weak, and so forth. But actually, if we look around, we see that everything goes through these cycles of activation and deactivation, of engagement and rest, whether we're looking at the day and the night, the seasons, or our very breath, every moment, energizing and releasing. So being able to establish a rhythm in our day and in our week and in our life of movement and stillness, of activity and rest. And, this is enshrined in the Abrahamic traditions for over 5,000 years with the Sabbath. We see it in indigenous cultures in different ways of being able to have periods of rest. So this is an essential part of wanting to have more sustainable energy, is
Mhm, mhm.
learning how to rest and really reclaiming our capacity and our right to rest. So I'll say one more thing on this and then see
Sure.
how this is landing with you before we talk about concentration. How do we develop more awareness of our body? Many of us have been conditioned to sort of live in our head through our concepts, or perhaps live identified with our emotions,
Mhm, mhm,
and the feelings that sort of push us around all day. And there's some connection to the body, but it's just on the emotional level. So there are many ways to open up and return to our innate embodied awareness. And it's important for me to name that it's something that's innate. We all come into this world
mhm.
intimately connected to the body, and we have to learn to disconnect from our body. Um, so, it starts with just that intention to connect to the body more, and then being creative and discovering what works for each of us. So, whether it's practices like dance or yoga or even the body scan and a meditation, those can be very helpful. Um, or doing things like paying attention to the sensations when you shower and feeling the water on your
Mhm.
skin, or paying attention to how it feels when you're walking and trying to connect with the movement and the wind on your skin. There's so many touch points throughout the day where we can begin to be more aware of our body.
Mhm.
And then integrating mindfulness is capacity to stay aware throughout the day. And then there's so many other benefits that come from that, but this is essential for energy.
Yeah. It is essential, and I find that I speak about the feeling body. I love that you pointed out that emotion is not the same thing. I mean, there's living in the mental world, there's
Hmm.
living in the emotional world, and then there's something beyond that,
Mm.
or more fundamental than that, which is I think of it firstly as the world of sensation. How, what do
Hmm.
we notice? And then as we build that capacity,
Hmm.
we start to be able to use that to determine, is this the right path for me?
Hmm.
Is this the
That's right.
right action for me to
Yeah.
take? Right meaning, is this aligned with
Yeah.
me?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. It opens up our intuition to be able to be
Mhm.
aware of our sensations at a deeper level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, is fundamental to being able
Yeah.
to live a more aligned life, aligned with our own guidance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So kind of similarly with
Mhm.
concentration or focus, these are innate capacities that we're endowed with as a human being, but that also need to be cultivated, or that can be cultivated. And again, it's important to start with an awareness of the context and what we're up against, right? That the pace of our lives, the influence of technology, notifications, the um, style of the media and television is all of these very short sound bites that sort of reduce our attention span and fragment our attention and our focus. So we're working against a lot of both momentum and habits in ourselves and a broader context every day that is not supportive of concentration. So the first point I like to make when talking about focus or concentration is to distinguish what I'm talking about from many of our ordinary associations with those words. And the tendency when we think about focus or concentration is to imagine a state that is sort of created and held together through will.
Huh.
That's a fairly brittle state. It's like I'm
Mhm.
pushing everything else out and pinning my attention down onto this one thing and holding it there.
Wow.
And you know, you can do that. It'll work for a little while, but it's very unstable. It's easy to get,
Mhm.
you know, thrown off, and it's expensive energetically. It uses up
Yeah.
a lot of energy. So the kind of focus and concentration that I'm interested in, that is um, necessary on the spiritual path and that is supportive in our lives, whatever we're doing, is a more holistic kind of concentration akin to a flow state where we're relaxed,
Mhm.
where our inner resources come together, they collect and gather because we're interested in whatever's happening and whatever we're doing. And we all experience this, you know,
Mhm.
having a conversation with a friend and everything else falls away, and all of a sudden it's been an hour,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know, or reading a gripping novel and you turn around and it's 2 a.m. and, you know, where did that time go? We're naturally focused and connected to what's happening. So how do we learn how to cultivate that process and support that happening more naturally? We recognize, well, I'm relaxed and I'm interested. And those are the key components of this kind of holistic natural concentration or focus. And so we can practice this, we can cultivate this in small ways every day of just
Mhm.
take any activity, whether it's folding the laundry, doing the dishes, walking to the train, and set a very sort of clear and wholehearted intention to do it with complete relaxation and interest. To
Ah.
say, instead of rushing through the dishes to get to the next thing,
Mhm. Yeah.
instead of frantically folding the laundry so that I can get to da da da, what would it be like to really give myself to this process and just do this one thing, or even brushing your teeth, to just do this
Mhm.
one thing and explore not so much the task itself, but how am I living in this moment as I do this task? And can I bring a quality of collectedness and wholeheartedness to it? And this shift in our focus from what I'm doing and how quickly I can get it done and getting to the
Mhm.
next thing to how am I living? This is an essential way of transforming our
Mhm.
lives,
Mhm.
because and this is one of the core um, principles behind the whole book and a lot of the work I'm doing right now in my teaching is that we're always practicing something. We are always teaching and training our mind, our heart, and our body to live in a certain way. And so,
Mhm.
if we're not paying attention to that process, we are reinforcing old habits and allowing the world around us to shape our hearts.
Yeah.
And the world is generally not looking out for us. It's informed by consumption and growth and speed and scarcity. So we'll be shaped by those forces. Whereas when we pay attention to this, we can start to bring in more of the beautiful qualities of our humanity, like generosity and joy, like concentration and energy, like patience
Mhm.
and kindness, and build those as our inner temple and then live in that sanctuary.
That's lovely. And it does connect a lot to the choices that we make. Do we just go on automatic and let our habits rule us? Or do
Yeah.
we say, do we get curious, which is another quality that you bring in?
Yeah.
Um, do we get curious enough to say, well, how is this? How could it be? How else could it be? How else, what
Yeah.
happens when I start to pay attention in the moment and live
Yeah.
from within that space?
Right. And this is one of the ways that aspiration grows is as we pay attention more and we begin to see a little bit of possibility or progress or shift. We go, oh
Mm.
yeah, it is possible. Oh yeah, I can, live in a different way or have more awareness or be more patient or have more concentration or experience more energy or get more rest, even in a moment or two, even in just
Mhm.
choosing to sort of shut the eyes and breathe for 2 or 3 moments instead of pulling out the device and scrolling through the notifications.
Right, right. I notice that when I am taking care of my grandson, my 10-month-old grandson,
Hmm. Yeah.
and boy, he's active all the time. And
Hmm.
okay, wouldn't you like to take a rest? Well, okay, but I'm needing that. So how can I work with my own energy? How can I be with myself and
Yeah.
with him and
Yeah.
keep him safe
Right.
and allow myself those moments of a deep breath,
Yeah.
a moment of connecting in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one more thing I would love for you to speak about, and that is about forgiveness.
Mm.
Um, it's such a big topic. It's such
Yeah.
a big thing, and it seems to me that at its heart that forgiveness has a radical nature to it. When we really go into it, it's
Mm.
not about saying that something didn't matter.
Hmm.
Oh, I forgive you. That didn't really matter. There's
Hmm.
something so much more fundamental about forgiveness societally when that
Hmm.
happens,
Hmm.
forgiveness of ourselves.
Hmm.
Oh, for a moment, I forgot who I really am. And so I
Yeah.
transgressed, or I was short, I was harsh. So I would, anyway, I would love for you to
Yeah.
speak about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, I let myself down. I didn't follow through on
Mhm.
this thing that was important to me, or I've been deferring my dreams, or it's often the hardest to forgive ourselves. So, yeah, it's a tender topic, I think. It's why it's the last chapter of my book, because I think it requires the most um, courage and
Mhm.
aspiration and energy and resources inside. Um, well, you've done a beautiful job at just introducing it, because I think it is so important to really differentiate forgiveness, what it truly is, from our associations and misunderstandings of it as some kind
Mhm.
of free pass or forgetting of the past or condoning of harm. And
Mhm.
there's a funny little phrase that goes around some of the spiritual and wellness circles that says, forgiveness is giving up all hope for a better past. So some
Yes,
people
indeed.
said Lily
Yes.
Tomlin said it first, as
Mhm.
I couldn't track down an origin of the quote, but um, so it's that sense of really coming to terms with the past.
Mhm.
And this points to the purpose of forgiveness, which is really less about the other person or people and more about our own heart and
Mhm.
freeing our heart from the pain of resentment and from the prison of being defined by our past.
Mhm. Mhm.
So rather than erasing something or forgetting something, is forgiveness is quite the opposite. It's actually um, a deep honoring and reckoning with what has happened,
Mhm.
that then allows us to move forward in into the future and really to inhabit the present in a different way. I'll
Mhm.
just share a brief personal story. My father passed away quite suddenly just before the book was finished,
Mhm.
and before he could meet his only grandson, my son. It was very, very difficult. Um, It's hard to even name it right now. I feel
Mhm.
some tears and emotion come up. It's been less than a year. It's just coming up on a year as we have this conversation. And one of the most difficult things in his passing was coming to terms with the ways that I was not as present as I could have been in
Mhm.
certain moments. Um, and I cherish all of the moments that I was. And fortunately, there were many. We were very close. We worked really hard to get to that point.
Mhm.
Um, and we, shared our love for each other openly. It was a very meaningful and rich relationship. And still, you know, because of a variety of factors, including some of the unresolved pain in his life and my own difficulty being with that and resistance to it. Um, there were important moments towards the end where I wasn't as there. My heart wasn't as present, connected, or open.
Mhm.
Um, and it was so painful. It
Mhm.
was so painful, all of a sudden he's gone and I can't get those moments back and I
Mhm.
can't redo them,
Mhm.
and I think we all have experiences like this in our lives. And so forgiveness, it's not about pretending that didn't happen or saying, "Oh, it's okay, you did the best you could." It's really just this sense of letting go inside, of accepting, yes, this is what happened.
Mhm.
This is the truth, and it's and it still hurts, and that's okay. And when I can come to terms with that, when I can fully accept and embrace that, it expands who I am. It
Mm.
brings me closer to my dad.
Yeah.
I feel his compassion and tenderness. And then I feel the learning from that. I feel the capacity and commitment to being present with my wife and our beautiful son, not because I'm forcing myself to or I should, but because I truly want to, and
Yeah.
something in my heart knows and understands the cost,
Ooh.
because it has come to terms with that, because I'm no longer resisting it,
Mhm.
and I'm no
Or
longer
beating
beating
yourself up.
exactly, or beating myself up about it. I'm actually able to metabolize the hurt and the pain and allow it,
Mhm.
almost, like nutrients to nourish my presence in my heart in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of the purposes of forgiveness. It allows us to make a new beginning and to live in a
Mm.
different way.
Thank you, and thank you for you shared that in the book. And as I read that, I want you to know that um, it brought into me the an experience with my teacher.
Mm,
And when she, well, the in the period just before she passed,
hmm.
and that I wasn't as
Mm,
present as I
yeah.
could have been.
Yeah.
And then when my dearest friend, a couple of years later,
Hmm.
was in that period of transition,
Hmm.
I knew that I had all of that to inform me and to
Right.
say, I get to be present. I get to be present with her
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
fully as I'm able to in this
Yeah.
moment. And
Yeah.
it shifted so much for me.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So I was
Um,
very aware of that in when I was reading
mm, mm,
your story,
yeah.
and then again as you spoke to it just now.
Mm, thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad also that you just brought in the value and the need for forgiveness on a societal level. And there have unfortunately just been far and few examples historically of this really happening. I think that South Africa is,
Mhm.
one of the examples that gets held up as showing the real power of forgiveness
Mhm.
on a collective level, with the Truth and Reconciliation
Mhm.
Commission that Desmond, Tutu headed up. Um, when we don't forgive, individually and collectively, we we become trapped in the past and are kind of bound to reenact and recreate it. And
Mhm.
forgiveness creates the conditions to end these cycles of violence that haunt our world and the kind of intergenerational trauma that gets passed on. Forgiveness is a kind of neutralizing force that breaks those chains and ends that cycle.
Mhm.
And it's hard. It's one of the hardest things. I tell the story of this one Lakota elder in the chapter. You probably recall
Mhm.
Albert Whitehat and his own journey with forgiveness personally for the harm and the injustice done against his people and himself personally by the United States government. He was sent off to the Indian boarding schools as a child. These kinds of examples give me hope for what's possible.
Mhm.
And when we look at the value of forgiveness on a collective level, I think it's so important to again come back to what it really means, what its purpose is,
Mhm.
and the need for processes and structures and support to make it happen. To really allow the telling of one's story and the witnessing of the real harm and the pain, which is part of forgiveness. We don't get to skip over that.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yes. Thank you for bringing that in particular into the conversation, and I don't mean into our conversation, but into the
Mm,
because you wrote this book into the
mm,
wider conversation.
yeah.
And it's so important. So thank you for that. And I would love for you to share how people can get in touch with you. Where can they find you teaching? How can
hmm
they get your book?
Yeah,
All
thanks.
of that.
Well, the book is available, everywhere, anywhere books are sold. The best way to get in touch with me or find out about my events, many of which are still online these days, is through my website, orenjaysofer.com. I have an email newsletter I send out maybe one email a month, given the parenting
Right.
responsibilities. But it's a
Mhm.
great way to stay in touch, and I would love
Mhm.
that if folks wanna learn more and stay in touch. You can sign up right on my website, and I am on social media at Oren Jay Sofer, posting some little snippets and teachings from the book.
Wonderful. Thank you, Oren, for all the wisdom that you have shared today. I
Mm.
really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks for
it.
having me and for the conversation, Laurie.
And I want to thank our listeners, our viewers, for being with us today at Wisdom Talk Radio. Because without you, this would just kind of be just Oren and I having a great chat, but
Mm.
it can go out from there. So join us here regularly for more wisdom and discovery and illumination. And if you feel so moved, please do share the episode, leave a review, because that helps more people to find this kind of wisdom. Subscribe, because that way you will get notified. For more for you personally about how to connect with your own personal quantum connection, take the quantum connection quiz and just keep being who you are. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us here at Wisdom Talk Radio. We wish you well in your conscious explorations. For more information and to join in the conversation, our website is wisdomtalkradio.com or at Wisdom Talk Radio on Facebook.